Lately, I've been kinda disgruntled with the fact that everyone seems to have every Beast Wars figure out of Kingdom before I've even gotten an update from Hasbro Pulse on where anything even is. And the only thing I've gotten out of the Kingdom line so far in terms of new Deluxe figures was yet another G1 character. Warpath, by the way, it's Warpath. But the reason I got this figure is because he's barely had any good figures over the years. I mean, for the love of God, the G1 figure was just an accordion hinge with arms. He was an absolute disproportionate disaster of a thing, masquerading as a robot, I guess. And then you had the criminally terrible representation of him from the Combiner Wars version, with the horrible vehicle mode cohesion and no chest barrel? More like, no thanks. The generation of this version absolutely rocks, but we've never really gotten this Generation 1 Minibot Prestige before. Don't get me wrong, I didn't say that was a bad thing. Generation 1 Warpath looks like a generic 8-bit video game sprite that you'd find in the old Mega Man games, and Generation Warpath absolutely rips in terms of general aesthetics and big dick energy. But for some die-hard G1 screen accuracy elitists, that wasn't enough. So the WFC Kingdom line decided to give it a shot, and I had to say, thank God for G1 elitists. This figure went from being a maybe top 15 to top 5 figures of all time kind of experience to me in under a week, and this is supposedly one of the weaker figures of the line. Speaking of the line, let's talk cohesion. What the hell is the theme of this line? Like, you have blowhard mechanical G1 fanservice characters like Cyclonus and Inferno and Warpath coming out, but then you also have the core class figures showing us the same regurgitated Generation 1 characters we already spent Deluxe, Voyager, and Leader money on, and on top of that, as if that wasn't enough, we have all the main Beast Wars squad coming out, and then you have random idiots like Paleotrex and Ractonite that split apart into dinosaur fossils and cartoonishly stupid melee weapons. Their less than pretty robot zombie modes came out in the same line? What is the theme here? What are you doing? What is this? But by some ungodly marketing genius, they managed to figure out a way of making the aesthetic between this and this cohabitate in the dumbest yet most absolutely perfect harmony in existence. Warpath transforms into an insanely cartoon-accurate representation of his Generation 1 tank mode. This is the most accurate we've ever gotten on a mainline shelf figure. This is the most stunning interpretation of his Generation 1 tank mode I've ever seen. They absolutely went to town with the paint budget on this thing. The red paint's extremely thick and gorgeously and evenly applied, but then there are some small amounts of color inconsistencies in the front of the barrel and underneath the back of his vehicle mode. The bicep joint exposed on the top of the tank has some white paint visible that kind of breaks things up in a way that can be slightly jarring if you're really looking to nitpick any of the cosmetics. One of the issues I have with this tank is that the treads had to be tabbed in absolutely perfect in order for the sides of the vehicle mode to tab in correctly. Basically, the way the vehicle mode kibble works is that the arms kind of tuck themselves underneath the legs, and then you kind of have to smush everything into place in a very specific way. Since the transformation mechanism at the torso wants to bend back into his robot mode, you kinda have to grab the top of the tank turret and lever it forwards while pushing the back of the tank into place from a very specific angle in a very specific way. There's also a small semi-optional parts forming piece that goes underneath the tank and helps everything stick together, but you pretty much have to use it in order for anything to tab in. The sculpting on this tank mode is amazing. The paneling and texturing work is pure art, and even though there's some panel lines that are kinda showing a little bit, they blend into the general aesthetics of the figure despite the struggle to get everything to work. But even though the vehicle mode cohesion is difficult to perfect, and you have to kind of move things in a very specific way in order to get them to lock in solidly, one thing I have to commend this figure for is the fact that all sides of the vehicle mode are completely covered. No hollow bullshit here. Hasbro is seen to be pretty lax about basically not including the entire front of the vehicle mode on certain figures like Siege, Megatron, or Earthrise Double Dealer. When you try to get low dramatic angle shots, it's kinda hard to do so when the entire front of the vehicle mode is missing. The real testament on this thing though, ladies and gentlemen, is the transformation. This thing is the absolute mark of what 35 years of engineering technology advancements can achieve. Even though animating the two halves of the tank splitting in half was an absolute nightmare, the way the legs work more than make up for it in the way they accordion up. That's not even what impresses me though. It's the way the legs twist inside out and backwards with all these moving parts and still come off with a clean silhouette. The complexity and sheer number of parts really make a cartoon-accurate aesthetic difficult to perfect. The way that the heels kind of grinded against the tabs does not feel right to me, but the rest of the transformation is pretty standard Warpath, with the standard issue tank turret compressing into his chest. The main issues I have with the transformation are one or two steps in the legs. For the most part, they're the highlight of the transformation, but the thigh rotations were more loose than the fucking propeller blade on Siege Springer, so I had to glue the inside of the joint to increase the friction, just so I could spread out his thighs for a bit of dynamic movement without him collapsing underneath his weight. The stupid flap on the back really takes the cake in the crippling frustration department. You pretty much have to have the finger dexterity of a brain surgeon with the finger size of a 4-year-old to navigate this step. They should have at least worked in something to get a good grip on this thing, or maybe even a part separator, because it's genuinely annoying and pops off too easy. Warpath features pretty much the standard issue WFC trilogy figure articulation, with no shortage of moving parts. Everything moves with a sense of fluidity and balance that's really difficult to achieve, largely a result of his gigantic work clompers. I do wish the ankles didn't look discombobulated from the rest of the body though. What's less forgivable is the fact he doesn't really come with any accessories. Like he has a shield, kind of, I guess? A punch gauntlet, maybe? Am I the only one who thinks this sucks? The guy already is only about 4.5 inches tall for a $3 price increase from $22.99 instead of the $19.99 we used to pay. And they not only made him 1.5 inches shorter than a typical Deluxe, but basically included nothing to compensate for the cost. Deluxe is not a size point, it's a price point, you idiot! Yes, I understand it's a Deluxe price point, not a size point, but I still feel like I'm being shorthanded on the engineering complexity and parts count in proportion to the increase of price. Something I forgot to mention is the fact that this thing is definitely made of a more premium, albeit softer, more pliable material. It doesn't feel like the brick-solid plastic used on this generation's Warpath. It feels like a more pliable and hardened nylon polymer. WFC Kingdom Warpath is a stunning figure, and it actually made the top 5 overall figures I have in my collection now. The transformation's nuts, his tank mode and robot mode look amazing, the articulation, dynamic movement of the joints, plastic balance, and mass redistribution all feel really damn solid, but there's 1 or 2 design flaws that I feel like they should have had the foresight to fix. The hollowness of the feet feels inexcusable, but he's a really damn solid figure, and I really have to commend the design team on a fantastically painted, well-articulated, dead ringer, end-of-the-line G1 Warpath that'll make all the screen accuracy elitists happy. Hell, it even made me happy. You can shove on some blast effects, get cartoonishly stupid with some fossilizers for a one-up on the battlefield, shove on some weaponizers from Siege, I don't really care. He's a fun figure and I recommend him as an underappreciated gem of the line. In an absolute flood of Beast Wars fan service, I might be an outsider in wanting him, and a lot of people seem complacent in ignoring him, but I ain't one of them because this is Warpath. This has been the Stop Motion Reviewer on Kingdom Warpath. Transform and roll out. Hello, this is the Stop Motion Reviewer again, giving you all a friendly reminder that all of these things are from the exact same line. Kingdom. What the hell even is this?